I'm Madison, 30 years old, and still the one no one sees. I thought maybe, just maybe, her wedding would be different. But even then, my name wasn't on the program. They gave me cleanup duty while the others toasted and posed for photos. But just before the cake was cut, something happened that made everyone stop mid-sip. They didn't expect me to show up that early. The morning air was still cool, the leaves crunching beneath my flats as I stepped out of my car. The garden was already half-set rows of white chairs, floral arches, champagne flutes sparkling on silver trays. The wedding was happening whether or not I had a seat. Cassandra's wedding had been the talk of the family for months. Every group chat, every phone call from Mom ended with, "You'll come, won't you?" But it never felt like a question. It felt like a formality, like they'd already penciled me out, but needed the courtesy of pretending I mattered. I stood near the catering tent, unsure of where to go, when a woman in a headset glanced at her clipboard and said, "You must be Madison. You're down to assist with cleanup after dinner, correct?" I blinked. "Sorry," she looked up, smiling professionally. "You're part of the helper list. After the toast, you'll be helping with breakdown. The mother of the bride said you're the best at organizing." She moved on before I could say a word. There was no invitation at my place setting. No place setting, in fact. I wasn't in the seating chart. I stayed quiet, just like I always had. Years ago, this would have made me cry in the bathroom, mascara running, hands shaking, but not today. Today I just nodded, thanked the woman, and walked around the periphery like I belonged somewhere in the shadows. By the time guests began arriving, I'd found a corner near the garden fountain where no one really looked. Occasionally someone would pass by and ask, "Are you with the staff?" I'd smile and say, "Sort of." Cassandra walked down the aisle in a designer dress Mom used to say would only ever belong on Madison someday. Funny how time edits memory. She looked beautiful. And when she locked eyes with Mom in the front row, they both smiled like they'd won something. Like this wedding was proof they'd chosen the right daughter to celebrate. When the vows began, I stayed back close enough to hear, but far enough not to ruin their view. My father caught sight of me just once. He gave a small nod, a polite one. No smile, then turned away. It was during the toast that someone offered me a glass of champagne. I declined. It didn't feel right holding a flute when I wasn't part of the story. Cassandra raised her glass and thanked every person who helped make this dream possible, especially Mom and Dad who gave everything. Her voice wavered with tears. I wondered if they remembered the scholarship I'd given up to help cover Cassandra's college deposit back when Dad's business had hit that rough patch. I wondered if it mattered anymore. Probably not. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light on everyone but me. I was standing behind a tree by then, hands folded, posture straight. They were laughing, loudly, joyfully, and I let them, but I didn't leave. There was a long table near the edge of the tent where the uncles gathered laughing about some vacation they'd taken with Dad years ago. I walked past to grab a napkin and one of them said, half joking, "Hey Madison, didn't know you were catering now." The others laughed and I forced a smile. "Just helping out," I replied, folding the napkin in half before moving along. It wasn't the words that stung, it was how casual they made it feel. Like this version of me had always existed, like I'd always been the extra. Back when we were kids, Cassandra used to throw these massive birthday parties. She got the pony rides, the cake towers, the matching outfits with Mom. Mine were smaller, quieter, and when I asked once why Dad said, "You're the kind of girl who likes things simple, aren't you?" I used to believe that. But maybe I just learned to make peace with what was given. After dinner, as the staff cleared empty plates and guests wandered toward the open bar, I found myself picking up crumpled napkins off the grass. One of the servers smiled at me. "You don't have to." I nodded, still bending down. "It's all right." From across the garden, Cassandra's husband, now officially my brother-in-law, waved for someone to refill his glass. His ring glinted in the fairy lights. It was the same ring Grandpa had shown me in his study once, saying, "This one's been passed down to the best man of the family." I guess the definition of best had changed since then. That ring used to be for me. Or at least that's what Grandpa used to say when we played chess in the library on rainy afternoons. "You've got sharp instincts, Maddie. Someday you'll run things smoother than any of them." Now I was clearing water glasses. The reception moved into the tent, laughter growing louder as music picked up. The playlist was full of songs Cassandra loved in college, and I only knew that because I was the one who helped her put them on her first iPod. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Aunt Denise. She wore a red shawl and a face full of practiced concern. "Sweetheart, why are you out here?" "Go join the fun. I'm okay." She looked at me a beat too long, then leaned in. "You've always been so gracious. That's rare these days." Then she walked off, and I was alone again. Inside, Cassandra stood at the mic, raising a toast with perfect posture, to love, to family, and to knowing who's always had your back. The crowd applauded. Someone clinked a fork against their glass and yelled, "Kiss they did." Cameras flashed, laughter erupted, and I stood just outside the tent, watching the light bounce off the white fabric, listening to the celebration without being part of it. That's when the whisper started. A couple near the exit, distant cousins from Grandpa's side, were talking. "Did you hear they're doing a reading?" Something Grandpa added. "A will at a wedding." The woman shrugged. He was adamant, said it had to be today. I didn't react. I just listened. And waited. The sun had dipped just enough to cast the garden in a soft amber hue, and the fairy lights began to flicker on one string at a time like a quiet curtain call. People were taking their seats again, drawn back by the promise of speeches, cake, or just the glow of a well-funded celebration. I stayed near the service station behind the tent. From there I could still hear everything, and no one expected me to speak. The microphone screeched lightly as Dad took the stage. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice warm, proud. "It means a lot to see family together, especially today when we celebrate Cassandra, our brightest star." Applause. Some clapped harder than others. Mom stood beside him, elegant and glowing, the perfect image of the mother of the bride. When she smiled at Cassandra, I saw nothing but certainty in her face, like this moment had always been inevitable. And Dad continued, "Before we move on to dessert, there's one more item on the program. A little surprise from Dad from Grandpa." That's when the air shifted. Just slightly. A hush settled. People leaned in. From the side aisle, Mr. Everett, Grandpa's lawyer, stepped forward. He was always polite, a little too formal, but never unkind. He held a leather folder against his chest like it weighed something heavy. "Your father," he began, left behind a short statement to be read today by his request. "He said it would make more sense once you'd all gathered." Cassandra tilted her head, amused. The guests murmured. No one knew what this was, but they listened. Everett opened the folder. The sound of paper sliding free was barely audible, but it felt louder than the music that had stopped playing, and I just stood there behind the tent wall, watching from the gap between two swaying curtains. He cleared his throat. "To my family," he read, "you've gathered to celebrate love. I hope today brings you joy, but I'd also like to remind you what legacy really means." Several heads turned. A few frowns appeared. Grandpa's voice through Everett continued, "A legacy isn't just about who smiles the brightest or hosts the biggest party. It's about character, grace, quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need applause to be real." Silence. Then Everett said, "Accordingly, I've amended my will. As of this morning, ownership of my company and estate passes fully to Madison." For a second, nothing moved. Nothing. Then a gasp. A single sharp breath from someone in the front. I didn't step forward. I didn't need to. I stood exactly where I was, letting the words hang, letting them find their place. From where I stood, I saw Cassandra's expression falter, just slightly. Mom's hand gripped her wineglass a bit too tight. Dad blinked. And the room stilled. The celebration didn't end, not exactly, but it never quite resumed either. And I picked up the last empty glass on the table nearest me, set it gently down. Then I walked away, slow, quiet, my shoes barely touching the gravel path. The day before the wedding, the house buzzed with movement. Garlands being hung, tables being dressed, trays passed from hand to hand in the kitchen like an orchestra preparing for a grand crescendo. But if there was a score, I wasn't part of it. Mom moved through the living room like a conductor, giving soft directions, correcting flower arrangements with just a touch, nodding approvingly when Cassandra tried on her final dress fitting. I stood near the doorway, arms tucked in, watching them from a distance that didn't feel physical. It was something else, a kind of unspoken boundary I wasn't allowed to cross. I had offered to help the day before, suggested setting up the guest gift bags or reviewing the table layout. Mom had smiled, but it was a tight, distracted smile. "I think we've got it covered, sweetie." It wasn't rude. It was worse, it was kind. Kind in the way someone might thank you for coming to a party you weren't actually invited to. Later that afternoon, Cassandra passed by with a clipboard in hand. Her nails were done already, French tips perfect and glossy, and she didn't look up when she said, "Oh, can you take care of the drink station tomorrow? We'll be too busy before the ceremony starts." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even framed as a task. It was something expected, like a footnote she forgot to assign to the help. I nodded. Just once. She didn't wait for a response. In the evening, guests began arriving at the rehearsal dinner. The front lawn was aglow with tea lights and chatter. I found myself seated at a table near the back, sandwiched between two distant cousins who hadn't seen me since I was 15. Madison Wright, one of them, asked, squinting. "Yeah," I smiled politely. "It's been a while." They nodded, then turned away. The speeches began after dessert. Dad rose first, his tone, proud, warm, familiar. "Cassie," he said, beaming, "you've always been the heart of this family. We're so proud of everything you've become." People clapped, glasses clinked, and of course he continued glancing my way. Briefly, "We're thankful everyone's here to celebrate with us." That was my mention. Not a name, just part of everyone. I smiled anyway. Because what else was there to do? Mr. Everett, the lawyer, arrived just as coffee was being poured. He wasn't meant to come until the next day, but Cassandra had insisted he stay at the house. Said Grandpa would have wanted him to feel part of the family. She even joked about giving him a +1. Laughter bubbled from her lips, sharp and sweet. Everett simply nodded, polite as ever. His eyes skimmed over me, once not with recognition but with something quieter, like a pause. The rehearsal wrapped up just before 10. The wedding planner gave final instructions. I wasn't on the list. Instead, I was pulled aside by a staff member who handed me a folded apron and said, "You'll be stationed near the back bar." Easy gig. Easy. In the guest room I shared with boxes of flower vases, I folded the apron neatly and laid it on the chair. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because there was no one there to hear it. The morning of the wedding arrived with a sharp chill in the air, despite the sun. It was one of those late fall days that couldn't decide if it was still autumn or already winter. The garden was trimmed and perfect white chairs in even rose gold ribbons fluttering gently with the breeze. The outdoor reception area glistened with crystal glassware and imported linens. I wore a pale blue dress, something modest, plain and practical, just like everything I'd been told to be. Over it, I slipped on the staff apron. No one questioned it. No one asked why the bride's sister was in the cleanup crew. Instead, I was handed a walkie-talkie and instructed to check the champagne buckets every 30 minutes. By noon, guests began streaming in. Smiles, hugs, photo flashes. Cassandra looked like a scene from a magazine. Her dress hugged her figure perfectly. Her makeup was flawless, and her laugh, oh, her laugh was the kind people followed. I stood at the edge of the garden near the catering tent, watching her greet a long line of friends and distant relatives. She moved from person to person, glowing with attention. When her eyes briefly landed on me, she offered a quick nod. Not of acknowledgement, but more like approval that I was doing my part. A few guests mistook me for a vendor and asked for directions to the restroom. I gave it with a smile. One woman asked where the valet was. Another asked if I could refill her wine. I did. Inside, Dad was checking the seating chart. We had to adjust the head table, I overheard him tell the planner. Add Everett next to Cassandra, he's basically family after all. Madison, "Oh, she's helping out somewhere. Don't worry about it." His voice was calm, not cruel, just matter of fact, like I had no place else to be. Grandpa's name came up once when a guest asked about his absence. "He's with us in spirit," Cassandra said, placing a hand over her heart. "He always loved weddings. That was it. No further mention." I wondered what Grandpa would have thought about the apron I was wearing. He'd always been quiet but perceptive. The kind of man who noticed the small things like who was helping clean up after dinner or who stayed behind to stack chairs when the music stopped. By the time the ceremony started, I was stationed near the drinks table handing out sparkling water and tidying napkins. The officiant spoke eloquently. Cassandra and her fiancé exchanged vows that made several guests dab at their eyes. The moment she said, "I do," a cheer broke out and I clapped too softly from the back. Then came the reception. Music swelled, plates clinked, speeches began. I moved silently between tables, clearing stray glasses, straightening place cards. A child dropped a cupcake and I was the one who knelt to clean it. As I stood back up, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored column by the dance floor apron on shoes, dusty hair slightly out of place. I looked like part of the scenery, not part of the story. It was during the father of the bride speech that the most pointed moment came. Dad raised his glass and said, "Cassie, you've made us proud since the day you were born. You've always carried the family's hopes. This wedding is just another example of your grace and excellence." A pause. Then he added, "And we're lucky to be surrounded by people who uplift, who understand that some people lead while others support. And that's okay." I knew it was aimed at me. He didn't have to say my name. The implication hung heavy in the air. I stood behind the bar table, the edge of the tablecloth clenched quietly in my hand. My stomach tightened, but I said nothing. Just reached for another glass, refilled the pitcher, and waited for the applause to fade. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the reception, Mr. Everett approached the DJ with a small envelope in hand. No one noticed at first, but I did, because I recognized the handwriting on that envelope. It was Grandpa's. Mr. Everett held the envelope with an air of quiet importance. He was Grandpa's lawyer, a man with a calm voice and deliberate movements. Most people barely noticed him at the wedding, blending into the background like a guest from a forgotten branch of the family tree. But now, as he stepped forward with that envelope, I felt something shift. It was subtle, a few heads turned, a lull in the conversation near the cake table. Even the music dipped into a softer rhythm, like it too sensed something was about to unfold. He didn't rush. Instead, he approached the microphone with steady steps and waited. When the DJ noticed, he lowered the volume. Everett cleared his throat and spoke into the mic. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's something I've been asked to do. Per the wishes of the late Mr. Charles Whitmore, I've been instructed to deliver a sealed document today at this very moment during the reception." Whispers spread like wildfire. Cassandra's smile froze, still holding her glass mid-toast. Dad's brow furrowed. I stayed by the back table, half hidden behind a floral arch apron still on napkin in hand. Everett continued, "This letter is part of Mr. Whitmore's last will and testament. He requested that this portion be read publicly, not at the formal will reading, but today in front of everyone." He unfolded the paper. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Everything else around me faded, the laughter, the clinking, even the wind. All I heard was the scratch of the envelope being opened, and Everett's voice smooth and unwavering. To my family, he began reading Grandpa's words, "This day marks a new beginning for one of you, and a reckoning for others." I've watched in silence, and in silence I've learned everything I needed to know. Several guests exchanged puzzled looks. A few leaned in. Dad stood behind Cassandra, arms folded tightly. Mom clutched her necklace. Then Everett read the next line. "My estate, the home, the shares, the trust will not go to Cassandra, despite the assumptions made. Nor will it be split evenly. Instead, it will be transferred entirely into the hands of the person who was ignored today, yet chose grace over grievance." He paused. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Her name," he said, "is Madison." Time stopped. No one clapped. No one moved. Even the staff people who'd worked alongside me for hours stared in stunned silence. I didn't move either, didn't step forward, didn't adjust my posture. I just stood there, the napkin still in my hand, damp from a glass I'd wiped clean minutes before. Cassandra's hand lowered slowly. She looked right at me, not angry, not even shocked. Just confused, as if the world had shifted beneath her. Dad's face paled. Mom's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Mr. Everett added, "All legal documentation will be handled after today. For now, Mr. Whitmore's wishes have been honored." Then he stepped down from the mic, leaving the crowd suspended in their own discomfort. I quietly folded the napkin, set it on the table, and began walking toward the edge of the tent. Not toward anyone. Not away either. Just forward. As I passed by the head table, a spoon slipped from someone's hand and hit the china plate with a sharp, hollow sound. That was the only noise. I didn't head for the exit. I didn't even look back to check if anyone was following me. My steps weren't rushed, but they were certain. The grass beneath my heels was still damp from the morning dew, and each footfall felt like it was pressing something permanent into the earth. Behind me, the music had stopped entirely. The party, if you could still call it that, was suspended in silence. Somewhere the DJ must have frozen, too unsure of whether to keep playing the jazz playlist or cue something more appropriate for a funeral. A part of me wondered if anyone would try to stop me. But no one did. I made my way to the valet stand, but not to leave. Instead, I found the same folding chair I'd been resting on earlier when I was still just the help. I sat down quietly and watched the tent. From this distance, I could see the edge of the crowd, the white drapes swaying and silhouettes of guests still in disbelief. I expected someone, maybe Cassandra, maybe even Mom, to come outside and find me. But it wasn't them. It was Grandpa's oldest friend, Mr. Langford. He'd flown in from Vermont and was one of the few people who always remembered my name. He walked over, hands in his pockets, a thin smile on his lips. "I always thought he'd do something like this," he said softly, taking the chair beside mine. "Your grandfather. He never did like the noise, but he paid attention, always did." I gave a small nod, unsure how to reply. He told me once, Langford continued, that the loudest people at family gatherings weren't the ones who'd carry the name forward. He said, "The one I trust the most barely speaks, but she sees everything." He turned to me. "That was you, wasn't it?" I didn't answer. But I didn't need to. From inside the tent I could see Cassandra now. Her posture had changed, no longer upright and radiant. She looked like someone still searching for a version of the day she could reclaim. She wasn't angry, not yet. Just disoriented. Like the sun had shifted and she couldn't find the light. Mom was at her side, gesturing wildly toward Mr. Everett. Dad stood stiff, staring at nothing. Everett himself was calmly repacking his briefcase, untouched by the storm he'd just stirred. I took a slow breath and stood. Langford didn't stop me. He only said, "Whatever you do next, don't explain. Let them figure it out on their own." I gave him a small, grateful smile. It was the most I'd shown anyone all day. And then I walked back in, not to claim anything, not to gloat, just to stand there one last time in the center of the tent, the same tent where I was once asked to wipe tables and stack chairs. The guests shifted as I passed. Not dramatically, no gasps, no whispers, but they noticed. Someone stepped aside. Someone else lowered their gaze. Even the caterer I'd worked alongside all morning gave me a small nod, his hand still holding a tray of untouched cake slices. I stopped near the gift table where a centerpiece towered in white roses and candles. Cassandra had picked it out herself, every petal curated. I didn't touch anything. Instead, I reached up and pulled off the apron still tied around my waist. I folded it neatly, smoothed the corners, and laid it gently beside the cake knife. And just like that, I wasn't part of the staff anymore. I was Madison Whitmore. The conversations resumed behind me in hushed tones that weren't about the floral arrangements anymore. Whispers wrapped around my name, not as an afterthought, but as the focal point. No one approached me directly. I wasn't sure if it was shame or confusion, but either way, it granted me space. And for the first time that day, that space didn't feel isolating. It felt earned. Near the open bar, my Aunt Ruth whispered something to her husband and shot me a long glance, not the disapproving kind she used to give, but curious. Her eyes lingered. I didn't return the look. I just kept walking, slow and steady. Cassandra was sitting now, surrounded by her bridal party, all of whom looked too stunned to console her. Her dress, the one custom designed for the day she'd dreamed about since we were little, seemed to swallow her frame. The confidence she wore like a second skin was slipping. Then our mother reached me. She stepped in with a strained smile, the kind she reserved for PTA meetings and HOA confrontations. "Madison," she said, "that was unexpected." I didn't respond. "I wish your grandfather had told us, but he didn't," I said, calm, without edge. Her expression flickered. "It's just a lot for Cassandra to process. You know this day was important to her." "I know. Maybe we can talk about this later, just us." I paused. "You mean after I've changed the linens and cleared the dessert plates?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I didn't press. I didn't need to. I just turned and continued walking. As I passed the gift table again, I saw Mr. Everett near the far end of the tent preparing to leave. He caught my eye and gave a small nod, one of quiet recognition, not of pity. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his suit pocket and placed a small envelope back onto the table. A private note, perhaps. One final message from Grandpa. The DJ tried to restart the music with a soft instrumental, a cover of something once played at a different family wedding. It didn't work. The tone had shifted too much. Cassandra finally stood. Her hands trembled as she walked toward me. I braced myself, not out of fear, but out of readiness. I didn't know she whispered. I tilted my head. Didn't want to or didn't try. She blinked, stunned by the question. Why would he do this? Why would Grandpa? Maybe he saw something no one else did. I waited for anger, denial, tears, something loud, but none came. Instead, she looked around, noticing for the first time the way people were watching us now. Not her. Us. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but stopped halfway. Her fingers hovered, uncertain. "I don't know how to fix this," she finally said. "I didn't come for that," I replied. "I came to do what was asked." Then softly, and I did. The air around us thickened, not hostile, but heavy with unspoken shifts. Somewhere in the distance, a tray of champagne glasses clinked together. That delicate sound echoed louder than anything else had that afternoon. I stepped back, offering her a small, almost imperceptible nod. A gesture not of forgiveness, but of closure. She stayed frozen. As I turned, I passed Mr. Everett again. He didn't stop me, didn't say a word. He simply extended a hand in farewell. I shook it. "You handled it exactly how he hoped you would," he murmured. I gave a soft, dry smile. I wasn't sure I could. He was. I didn't linger. I exited through the same arch I'd walked through that morning, the one decorated in cascading white orchids. Back then, I'd slipped in unnoticed, carrying supplies and folding linens. Now the same path carried a different weight. Outside, the autumn air had cooled, leaves rustled softly across the gravel path, and the late afternoon light broke through the canopy in long golden beams. I walked slowly, not because I was unsure of my steps, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt no need to rush or hide. I reached my car at the edge of the lot, the same one I'd parked behind the caterer's van that morning to avoid blocking the guest vehicles. I placed my small bag in the back seat and stood still for a moment, hands on the doorframe. I could still hear faint murmurs from the tent behind me, soft conversations, clinking glasses, the occasional forced laugh trying to reintroduce normalcy, but it all sounded distant now, like echoes from a past that no longer held me in place. As I opened the car door, I caught a reflection in the side mirror. Cassandra had stepped out from the tent and stood alone watching me. Her arms were folded, but not defensively, more like she was holding herself together. She didn't wave. I didn't either. I got in and closed the door with a quiet but final click. The sound wasn't loud, yet it punctuated everything. The engine turned over smoothly, and I let it idle for a moment. I looked at myself in the mirror, same face, same expression, but there was something different in the way I looked back at myself. A steadiness, a peace that didn't require anyone else to validate it. I backed out slowly, not in haste, not in flight, just leaving. At the edge of the driveway stood a stone column with the family name etched into it, a detail I hadn't noticed on the way in, maybe because I wasn't meant to notice until now. I paused the car beside it and rolled the window down. The breeze carried with it a hint of the orchard nearby, the same one Grandpa used to walk me through when I was little, telling me stories no one else seemed to remember. One of his favorites ended with the line, "The ones who say the least are usually the ones who know the most." I whispered it now, just loud enough for myself to hear. Then I smiled, not for the past, but for the quiet certainty of who I had become. As I turned onto the main road, a single notification lit up on my phone screen beside me. A message from Mr. Everett. "Your grandfather's final request. Don't let them pull you back into silence." I didn't reply. Some messages don't need answers. They just need to be heard. The road ahead was open, long, quiet, and bathed in light. And this time I didn't feel like the forgotten sister anymore. I felt like the story. Sometimes the loudest thing in the room is the silence of someone who finally stopped asking to be seen. Not to prove a point, not to win, just to walk away fully known and no longer waiting for permission.